Welcome back. You're listening to another episode of Woman Wiser, and this is part one of my two-part series on burnout, where we look at how being underwhelmed, stressed, and overfunctioning can lead to exhaustion and explore how to regain agency so we can navigate slippery patterns and pave our way to a more whole and fulfilled future. It was 2009, and the word burnout did not exist in everyday language. Mental health was not a conversation. It was a secret to be kept under lock and key, and I was living both of them. Back then, I didn't have words for what was happening. I didn't have language for what was happening. I just knew I was exhausted in ways rest didn't fix. And what I thought was personal weakness turned out to be something far more universal. I experienced this again in the early 2010s. And then in 2019, the World Health Organization gave burnout an official definition: an occupational phenomenon caused by chronic workplace stress not successfully managed, marked by exhaustion, mental distance from work, and reduced efficacy. Useful, yes. True, also yes. And also incomplete. That definition made burnout one-dimensional. It framed it as a workplace problem and measured it by how effective you were at your job. Now, if you've ever lived burnout, you know the truth. It's not just about work, and it's not just about output. It has the capacity to run so much deeper than that. That definition also reinforces the same culture that breeds burnout in the first place. Productivity is worth, exhaustion is failure, and the idea that if you just manage stress better, you wouldn't end up here. What I have learned since is how multi-layered this term is. So much so that we probably need a new term for burnout. While the traditional definition is tied to work, and work is often where burnout culminates, overwork is only one part of the equation. As a woman in leadership, a coach, a friend, this word comes up a lot across every industry and every age. And what I've come to understand and relate to is that underwork and underwhelm are just as much causes of burnout. When we're not being challenged, not growing, when we feel unseen, that can drain us just as deeply as doing too much. Here's what I mean. You might be feeling the impact of burnout if you've outgrown the space you're in. If the pace doesn't match your nervous system. Maybe it's too slow and you're bored and feeling unfulfilled by that. Maybe it's too fast and you crave depth instead of speed. The inclusion of underwork and underwhelm really reframes burnout as a mismatch between energy and environment. Not just from exhaustion of doing too much, but from a space of purpose and fulfillment. When we start to see burnout through that wider lens, it opens a door to more awareness, more reflection, more attention, so we can name what we need and choose wisely instead of defaulting to what we've been taught to tolerate. Feeling undervalued or understimulated, this creates a cumulative burden on how we see ourselves. Sometimes we try to make up for it, hustle harder, add more on. Other times we may withdraw into apathy. Either way, we're living out of sync with who we are and what we need. And something that I have found over the years from untethering and almost befriending burnout so I could learn every inch of its anatomy is that these reactions are tied to something deeper. A pattern that keeps coming back to teach me something. Here's the thing. We are allowed to dream big, have hopes, have expectations for ourselves. We just don't want to drown in them. Especially the invisible ones that may not be ours to hold in the first place. And the invisible expectations are the ones that have consistently sent me into a loop. So that's not to say our jobs should always be easy or stress-free. Work pushes us. And when we're challenged beyond what we thought was possible, our perceived capacity grows. I like challenge. I like growth. So that's exactly why I need to know how to care for myself, and before that, how to choose wisely. I remember having a manager who, instead of saying what he needed, would just appear and say, "Got a sec?" Even if it was something good, even if it had nothing to do with me, my body went straight into alarm. The Eminem song would play through my head. A different connotation in this case, but the lyrics would just pulse through me. Palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already, mom's spaghetti, but on the surface, he looks calm and ready. And that's what I was. Funny side note about that last statement. That statement is the most said thing to me in any environment I've ever been in, that I am always composed, calm, and ready. And it was because I had to learn how to ground my energy and manage chaotic energy at a really young age. But back to the point, this style of communication brought all of that up. And this is just one example of how they communicated and how that style did not match my energy. At the time, the story I held behind that was, I'm always in trouble. So for a long time, my nervous system was wrecked every time they said it. Eventually, I just lived in overdrive and hypervigilance, checking, rechecking, triple checking, editing, polishing. These things breed emotional fatigue. The constant internal debate about something not working. Eventually, I worked through a lot of this, separating my story from the situation. And it was in knowing that I was able to construct a clear vision of my patterns, the fight or flight, which types of communication and environments did not feel safe for my nervous system, and also create a picture of how I wanted to feel. What environments made me thrive? I wanted more just to survive at baseline every day. I wanted to be challenged constructively, to grow, to be in rooms with people who challenged my thinking. And I wanted to be somewhere where I had runway to use my creativity and my skills to help make things better, not just complete a task. So here are a few things I began to check on consciously to support myself, because I began to know myself better. I knew I wasn't free of these stories, and at one time they protected me. So I knew that there needed to be a balance at play of learning what they were here for today and where they became my limits. So the first thing, understanding my environment, whether this is work conversations, relationships, I listen to language, how people communicate, their responsiveness, their silence. Those mirror their values and their tolerance. The second thing is doing my research, knowing what safety means to me inside, and asking questions about values, expectations, work-life balance, or in a relationship, getting curious, asking, what do you mean by that? If you tend towards people pleasing or nodding along to keep the peace, these might help you understand what you're walking into. The third thing, knowing my capacity. What relationships give me energy or deplete it? What patterns am I still working through? And what do I know creates tension for me? The fourth thing, if you feel the weight of expectations, check in with yourself and with the person setting them. And the last one, and this one goes especially if you're in that phase of perhaps feeling underwhelmed, be honest about where you are in your career and your life. Put yourself out there, share what you aspire towards. Advocacy comes from showing up consistently for yourself, honestly, and as a whole version of yourself. That will lead us down the path that we're meant to go on. Some might call it building your own seat at your own table, and some might call it alignment. The agency I just described is so important because one of the most devastating parts of burnout is the feeling of losing agency over your energy, over your emotions, your focus, feeling misalignment, feeling underwhelmed, feeling apathy or disconnection. And when you're depleted, the brain centers that help you think clearly and creatively are offline. So we get stuck in this loop where burnout breeds more burnout. Every time I've hit a true burnout collapse, the story behind it has been the same. Avoiding a recurring pattern, telling myself, next time I'll just handle it better. That pressure only bottled up the fear. It kept me on high alert. It also made me feel like I was constantly cycling through a phase of I'm not good enough, or I'm more than this. I need to do something different. I need to do something better. I'm feeling like a shell of myself. I am not whole. It wasn't until I understood what was at the root of the pattern that I could start to catch myself earlier, to practice breaking it. And that's the key word here, practice. It's not a today thing. It's an everyday thing. People say do the work, and that's not just a catchphrase. It's the truth. It's messy, and it's also where resilience lives. It's where we start to learn the real meaning of abundance because we open ourselves up to an entirely new realm of possibility. Meet me in part 2, where we'll take a deeper look at the patterns that drive overwhelm, the sprint, the striving, and how we can find our way back to rhythm.